"Oh, no, no, that's like wearing a sign." Now I'm not embarrassed to ask for a wheelchair. And he said, I'm proud of you, Annette.
Annette Funicello was once the most beloved face in America. She was the embodiment of innocence for an entire generation, a girl with Mickey Mouse ears, smiling on screen, offering a kind of fame that needed no flash, no noise. But what few people knew was that her life never truly belonged to herself. Since the age of 12, Annette had lived under Walt Disney's shadow. Her hairstyle, even the trim of her swimsuit, all strictly controlled. She became a teenage goddess in beach films, yet wasn't allowed to show her navel. She had the voice, the beauty, the loyalty, but not the freedom. Annette didn't rebel. She chose to endure. From a heart broken by her first love, to a quietly crumbling marriage, and finally to a degenerative nerve disease that lasted 25 years, something that took away her voice, her ability to walk, and the stage lights that once felt like home. This is not a story about fame. This is a story about the price of being the good girl, and the courage of a woman who faced every loss without ever once complaining. If you grew up with the sound of Annette Funicello's voice, perhaps it's time to look back, not just to remember, but to truly understand the life she lived. Annette Joanne Funicello was born on October 22, 1942, in Utica, New York. Her father, Joseph Edward Funicello, was a hard-working, quiet Italian-American mechanic. Her mother, Virginia Jean Albano, was a homemaker, graceful, gentle, and always convinced that this little girl had something special. The Funicello family wasn't wealthy, but it was full of love. When Annette was 4, the family moved to San Fernando Valley, California, hoping for a better life like so many other immigrant families. They lived in a trailer park, her father working tirelessly to support them, while her mother sewed Annette's ballet costumes by hand, because they couldn't afford store-bought ones. Annette was shy, easily embarrassed when speaking in front of others, but music and dance were where she felt safe. At just 10 years old, she once told her mother, "I don't need anyone to watch me. As long as I'm dancing, I feel truly alive." In 1955, a small event in Burbank changed her life forever. During a performance of Swan Lake at the Starlight Bowl Outdoor Theater, Annette, playing the White Swan, caught the eye of Walt Disney himself, who was quietly scouting new talent for a show called the Mickey Mouse Club. Walt didn't take his eyes off the little girl. He told his assistant, "This girl has a light. It's something you can't teach." Annette was invited to audition. Out of more than 200 candidates, she was the only one who made Walt nod on the spot. Not for her voice, not for her looks, but for an inexplicable sense of realness. She became one of the first Mouseketeers at just 12 years old. From a timid child in a tiny dance class, Annette stepped into a world where every smile had to be on cue, every move flawless. She never thought she would be famous. But no one knew then that shaking hands with Walt Disney wouldn't just open the door to stardom. It would be the gateway to years of being shaped, controlled, and silently sacrificed. From the moment she stepped into the Mickey Mouse Club, Annette Funicello was unlike any other child. At the age of 12, she was signed to a 7-year contract by Walt Disney, earning $160 a week, a significant sum for a girl who had never acted in a film. But what convinced Walt wasn't her performance skills. It was, as he told his assistant, an unteachable purity. Annette quickly became a phenomenon, performing skits, singing, dancing. She appeared constantly on television as the embodiment of a perfect Mouseketeer. By the end of the first season, she was receiving more than 6,000 fan letters per month, far surpassing her fellow cast members. Magazines dubbed her Disney's Princess. In Walt's eyes, she was the brightest gem, and also the one that had to be most tightly protected. From her hairstyle, skirt length, and how she smiled on camera to whether she was allowed to date, everything was dictated by studio policy. When Annette developed feelings for her co-star Lonnie Burr, the studio immediately stepped in, citing the need to preserve her wholesome image. No partying, no personal statements, no mistakes allowed, not even a glance out of line. Alongside the Mickey Mouse Club, she was given her first starring roles in programs like Adventure in Dairyland, The Further Adventures of Spin and Marty, and most notably, Walt Disney Presents, Annette, a television series named after her, co-starring Richard Deacon. It was a milestone affirming her status as Disney's Golden Girl, but it was also the first cage built around a young girl who hadn't yet had the chance to grow up. In 1959, Annette made her official film debut with The Shaggy Dog, a wildly successful family movie. But as she stood on set, playing yet another version of America's Good Girl, Annette began to feel suffocated. At 17, she was taller, more beautiful, more emotionally complex, but the public still only saw the girl with Mickey Mouse ears. In a later interview, she once reflected on her final days with the Mickey Mouse Club. "I didn't know if I was saying goodbye to my childhood or to my own freedom." And from that moment on, quietly, Annette began to nurture something she had never dared to before: the desire to grow up without betraying who she had once been. It was then that she made the decision to step beyond the Disney mold and try something new, to be sensual, but still herself. In the final episode of the Mickey Mouse Club in 1958, Annette Funicello broke down in tears. "I had never cried that much in my life," she said. "It wasn't just a farewell to childhood. It was the moment she realized sometimes the price of fame is never being allowed to grow up." Though she left the show, the door to Disney didn't close. Annette continued appearing in series like Zorro, El Fuego Baca, and most notably Annette, a series bearing her name, where audiences first heard her sing "How Will I Know My Love." No one expected that Gentle Song would become a turning point. The volume of letters sent to the studio was so overwhelming that Walt Disney was compelled to release it as a single. He then personally signed Annette to a recording contract, even though she humbly said, "I only sang because Walt told me to try." In 1959, her song Tall Paul became the first hit by a teenage girl to break into the Billboard Top 10. That success wasn't driven by vocal technique. It came from her pure, unpretentious voice, just like the person she was. After that, Pineapple Princess and How Will I Know My Love conquered radio stations across America, launching a new chapter from wholesome mouseketeer to full-fledged teen idol. But success didn't mean freedom. She was expected to succeed, but still remain the good girl. Walt Disney once stated firmly, "Annette is the symbol of purity, and I won't let anyone ruin that." Every change, from her hairstyle to skirt length, required approval. By the early 1960s, as her contract with Disney neared its end, Annette decided to step out of the glass box that had raised her. Her first transformation, bold yet careful, came from something seemingly harmless: a bikini. That didn't reveal her navel. In 1963, the film Beach Party was released, marking her first on-screen pairing with Frankie Avalon in a series of fun beach films. Its massive success kicked off an entire genre: beach blanket bingo, muscle beach party, how to stuff a wild bikini. Behind the scenes, the control persisted. One producer revealed, "We had to hire someone just to check Annette's navel in every shot. If it showed, we had to reshoot." But Annette didn't rebel. She didn't destroy her image. Instead, she chose to go further, within the very limits that defined her. Annette in a bikini, sensual yet modest, became a new standard in American pop culture. In an era of rebellious rock and roll, Brigitte Bardot's nudity, and Jane Fonda's radicalism, Annette charmed the public with a kind of moral sensuality. Life magazine called her the final pride of old-fashioned American decency. 17 wrote, "Annette is the girl every mother wants her daughter to become, and every guy wants to marry. A review in the New York Times once observed, "Annette Funicello doesn't represent sexual liberation. She represents a kind of conditional coming of age, a Disney-certified sensuality. And oddly enough, that made her more trustworthy than anyone." Beyond films, Annette maintained a singing career and became the face of Skippy Peanut Butter, a brand tied to the image of the all-American family. In commercials, she wore A-line dresses, smiled gently, and delivered simple lines. "Only Skippy tastes this good." And people believed it because it was Annette Funicello. Even at the height of fame, she lived by Walt Disney's first reminder: always be yourself. But remember, people are watching. Annette never forgot that. But deep inside, a part of her longed to live truthfully, to let go, to be vulnerable like any ordinary person. In 1987, as a wife, a mother, and someone who had stepped away from the spotlight for a time, Annette reunited with Frankie Avalon in the comedy Back to the Beach, a gentle tribute to youth. The film had a nostalgic tone, playful, familiar, and was beloved not just for its humor, but for reuniting two living icons of a generation. She was no longer just the Annette of Disneyland, nor simply the teen idol of the 60s. She was a grown woman who had passed through fame and control and now knew what it meant to choose her own way back. And as the stage lights began to fade, Annette chose a different role, not on screen, but in real life. The role of a wife, a mother, and a woman learning to protect what she loved. Not through image, but through faith. Amid the stage lights and rounds of applause, Annette Funicello once had a teenage romance that made all of America swoon. She and Paul Anka, the handsome singer-songwriter, were one of the most adored couples of the early 1960s. Anka even wrote the song Puppy Love just for Annette, a sweet ballad that became legendary. But years later, in a televised interview, Paul delivered a cold remark. "Annette is the kind of girl everyone wants to marry, but no one dates." The public was stunned. Did it mean that behind the image of the teen goddess was a girl so perfectly boxed in that no one dared get close? That single line didn't just sting, it gave voice to a quiet loneliness that had long lingered within Annette. Despite being adored by millions, she was often seen as a symbol, not a human being. And in the midst of that, when she needed someone untouched by the spotlight, someone who could see her in the everyday, she chose Jack Gilardi, her agent, older than her, and the first man who made her feel seen as a real woman. In 1965, at the age of 22, Annette married Jack Gilardi, her representative at the time. They had 3 children, Gina, Jack Jr., and Jason. To the public, they looked like an ideal family, the Disney beauty now transformed into the image of a model mother. But few knew that Annette had sacrificed more than what she revealed in her memoirs. Though her writing remained gentle and avoided conflict, some behind-the-scenes accounts hinted at a far less peaceful marriage. Signs of control, emotional strain, and a quiet loneliness stretched across many years. She never accused anyone, never uttered a complaint. But the way she quietly left the marriage in 1981, after 16 years of endurance, was the most silent yet clearest act of defiance. And that very silence left the public even more confused. The tabloids didn't run wild. Annette offered nothing but a soft confirmation. Yet within her audience, especially the generation that grew up with her, a sense of loss surfaced. The woman who once symbolized the perfect family had stepped away from marriage without a single word of bitterness. And it was in that moment that people began to see Annette as a real person, not the untouchable teen goddess, but a woman who had endured, been hurt, and was now finding a way to protect herself. It wasn't until she met Glenn Holt, a calm, private horse trainer, that Annette finally felt safe again. They married in 1986, and Glenn became her devoted partner and caretaker throughout the long years of illness. Not a celebrity, not a public figure, just a regular man who loved her unconditionally. With Frankie Avalon, her frequent co-star in the Beach film series, Annette also bore her share of quiet pressure. Off-screen, Frankie was cheerful but at times inattentive. There were moments when he involved himself too deeply in her image and career decisions, leading some crew members to describe his behavior as possessive. But Annette stayed silent. No scandals, no retaliation. Throughout her life, she upheld one principle: say less than you know, love more than people expect. That quiet transformation, subtle at first, became a deeply human declaration by 1992. When Annette publicly revealed she had multiple sclerosis, after nearly 5 years of keeping it hidden, the media didn't respond with gossip. Instead, came a wave of shock mixed with admiration. Major outlets like the Los Angeles Times and People praised her courage. Facing a cruel illness not to be pitied, but to take action and shift public understanding. Annette once feared being misunderstood. But when she appeared publicly, her gait unsteady, she was no longer the Disney girl. She was a warrior, a woman who stepped beyond perfection to become authentic, vulnerable, and in that, more powerful than ever. That was the price she paid to preserve the Disney princess image: self-censoring emotions, sacrificing personal freedom, and living inside the shell of an ideal woman, even when it hurt her deeply. Annette Funicello lived the way she acted, always composed, always mindful of appearances, always putting others before herself. But when life tested her with physical pain, it was she, not any role she played, who became the real icon. No longer the Disney girl, but a woman who dared use her illness to reshape how an entire country thought. Annette Funicello never left behind any earth-shattering declarations. She didn't stage dramatic comebacks, nor did she ever take on the media machine. But it was precisely that humility and a spotless life lived in the middle of a noisy Hollywood that made her one of the most deeply respected role models. When Annette publicly revealed her diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, MS, in 1992, after nearly 5 years of silence, the public was shaken. Not from shock, but from the sheer weight of that long quiet. She didn't appear to complain or seek pity. She appeared to act. The very next year, she founded the Annette Funicello Research Fund for Neurological Diseases, an organization bearing her name with the mission to support MS research and treatment. But she didn't stop there. Alongside her husband, Glenn Holt, she developed the Annette Funicello Teddy Bear Company, each bear a collectible item, with all proceeds donated to medical causes. She also launched her own perfume line, Cello by Annette, to raise funds for hospitals and neurological research. No heavy promotions, no tearful talk show appearances, just steady, quiet, and wholehearted action. Not long after she went public with her illness, a handwritten letter arrived at the Annette Funicello Foundation. It came from a 35-year-old woman named Cheryl M. from Ohio, who had just been diagnosed with MS. In the letter, she wrote, "I thought my life was over, but when I saw Annette still smiling, even though she could no longer walk, I knew I could keep going. She didn't say much, but I heard her clearly. I am not alone." There wasn't just one letter like this. Hundreds of people, from patients to parents, from longtime Disney fans to those who grew up with the Pineapple Princess, wrote with gratitude for a woman who dared to use her once perfect image to do something imperfect, to appear weak, visibly exhausted, and still be inspiring. On online forums of the time, people called her a quiet hero. No speeches, no mass campaigns, just being herself, brave enough to show all of America a simple truth: that illness could not take away a person's dignity. But the recognition for Annette didn't stop at the respect of her audience. On September 17, 1993, Annette Funicello received her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 6834 Hollywood Boulevard. It was an acknowledgement of tireless contributions, from her childhood in Mickey Mouse ears to her unyielding journey with a devastating disease, from entertainment icon to silent force of inspiration. In the final years of her life, when the illness had nearly robbed her of speech, Annette's image lived on through waves of nostalgia. She appeared in special television features, documentaries, and was honored at Disney tribute events. People no longer referred to her as the cute girl with the Mickey Mouse ears, but as the childhood goddess of an entire generation. Bob Iger, chairman of Disney, once said it best in a single, simple sentence: Annette Funicello is a permanent part of the Disney family. She inspired an entire generation. No scandals, no self-promotion, just a life lived with grace until the very end. That was how Annette left behind her legacy. Annette Funicello had always feared one thing the most: being misunderstood. When she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS, in 1987, she didn't share it with the public. Not out of shame, but because she feared people would see her unsteady walk and assume she was drunk. Such an image for someone who symbolized America's childhood dreams was something she couldn't allow. It wasn't until 1992, after 5 years of silence, that she finally revealed her condition, stunning the public with the strength she had quietly carried all along. But that was only the beginning of a battle fought far from the spotlight, one in which she would gradually lose every aspect of what made up an ordinary human life. She lost the ability to walk, first relying on a cane, then confined to a wheelchair. As the disease progressed, she became fully paralyzed, unable to speak, fed through a tube, and could only communicate through faint hand gestures. But what she never lost was her will to fight. She agreed to undergo the most advanced treatments available at the time, from deep brain stimulation to experimental stem cell therapies, always holding on to one hope: if I can't be cured, maybe the people after me will be. That sentence, spoken by the woman who once embodied childhood dreams, became a light for MS patients across the country. In 2011, another disaster struck. A devastating fire engulfed the Encino home Annette shared with Glenn Holt. At the time, she lay motionless in her room. Glenn, her life partner since 1986, carried her out of the flames, escaping with her just in time. Though her body continued to fail, she was still seen smiling softly when listening to her grandchildren's stories, a rare flicker of awareness in her final years. Glenn remained by her side, wiping her face, feeding her, talking to her, even though he never received a single reply. On April 8, 2013, Annette Funicello took her last breath at her home in Bakersfield, California, after 25 years of living with illness. She passed quietly, no audience, no stage, no fanfare. But she was not alone. The girl who once made all of America fall in love with her sparkling eyes and sweet voice ended her journey with a silence full of dignity. The way Annette Funicello left this world, quietly without asking for anything, was the same way she had lived her entire life. She didn't need to rebel to prove she was different. She didn't need to expose her pain to earn sympathy. She chose to live with loyalty, kindness, and a quiet endurance that bordered on extraordinary. She never traded truth for fame, never spoke out against anyone, even when she had every reason to. And, in an industry where image is constantly manipulated, Annette chose to hold on to her dignity, even when it cost her deeply. She may not be the most frequently mentioned woman in Hollywood history, but she's one of the few who made an entire generation pause when looking back, because it was precisely what she didn't say that made her great. In a world where everyone tries to stand out through noise, Annette Funicello taught us something else. That silence, when filled with kindness and resilience, can echo for a very long time. If you grew up with the melodies of Pineapple Princess or evenings spent around a black and white television, remember this. Behind those bright, innocent memories was a woman who gave up so much, just to keep that world as beautiful as you remember it. And if you believe that people like Annette Funicello deserve to be heard, not just because they were icons, but because they lived truthfully, then share this story. Perhaps, in today's noisy world, we still need a gentle example like hers to remind us to slow down, be kinder, and have the courage to choose what's right.